The Civil Service Commission of the Philippines is a government agency that acts as a human resource institution with the task of overseeing the integrity and welfare of the country's 1.4 million government workers, stationed in various government offices nationwide.
Civil Service Commission is a constitutional body. It's the central HR institution of the Philippine government and the advisor to the President on human resource management matters.
Originally established in the 1900s as a bureau that administered civil service exams, it has since been converted into a commission in 1959 through Republic Act 2260 or the Civil Service Law. But it was only in 1975 that the functions of the commission was redefined by virtue of Presidential Decree 807 or the Civil Service Decree of the Philippines.
Now, the qualification standards are relevant education, relevant training, relevant experience, and the appropriate civil service eligibility. But to have the appropriate civil service eligibility, the individual must first pass a career service examination. And that's given nationwide, either paper and pencil or written or through the computer.
Today, the Civil Service Commission is headed by its present chair, Dr. Francisco Duque III, who has made it the agency's goal to follow through with the mandate set upon them by the law. If the CSC is the central human resource institution for government workers, do they follow the Labor Code of the Philippines? If they don't, what set of labor laws do they follow? How are government workers protected? Good evening. You're watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will be discussing your legal rights as a government employee under the Civil Service Commission. What you need to know about the Civil Service Commission, its functions, its responsibilities, and what you need to do to uphold your labor rights under the Commission.
Our guest for tonight is Dr. Francisco Duque III, Chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and Attorney Ariel Ronquillo, Associate Commissioner of the Civil Service Commission. Good evening.
Good evening, sirs. Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening.
I'm so happy we have no less than the Chairman of the CSC here to answer questions.
I know. And I know there are a lot of questions. Obviously, there's a lot of employees in the government and those who want to be part of the government. And so we'd like to start off. Maybe, Chairman, we'll throw the first question to you. Can you what is the Civil Service Commission really, and what are its functions, responsibilities?
Well, very briefly, the Civil Service Commission is the central human resource institution of the Philippine bureaucracy. And its task is to review, formulate, implement, monitor, and programs, policies, and projects for the 1.4 million bureaucrats. Constitutionally, it is mandated to do the following things. No? First, it is tasked to develop the career service, and then it is tasked to adopt measures to promote meritocracy, efficiency, integrity, morale, progressiveness, and responsiveness in the civil service. And it is also tasked or mandated to strengthen the merit and reward system of government. And of course, it advises the government of the Philippines on civil service matters. Also, it is tasked to integrate all human resource development programs for all levels and ranks in government. And also, it is to institutionalize a management climate that is conducive to public accountability.
Chairman Duque, you mentioned 1.4 million government employees covered by the CSC.
Right.
Can you clarify what types of jobs? Like, for instance, if you're a janitor working in the office of the Register of Deeds, are you covered by the CSC? How do you know if you're part of this whole system?
Well, you see, the way it's structured is that the state workers are classified under three categories. The first level, which consists of the clerical trades, crafts, and custodianship positions. Ito yung mababa, first level. And then you have the second level, which includes technical, professional, and scientific positions. And then, of course, the third level, which is the highest, consists of positions in the Career Executive Service, or the CES positions. And these positions are occupied by appointees of the President.
I see. Okay. So, in a way, Chairman and Ariel, I guess you're the biggest employer in the country, right?
That's right.
It has to be the biggest employer. And so you're in charge of all hiring and firing processes. Attorney, are you in charge of all of that?
Well, actually, appointments in government is addressed to the sound discretion of the appointing authority. Each agency has its own head who is given the power to appoint its own officials and employees. However, if something goes wrong with their employment or with their appointment, that's the time that they can go to the CSE for some redress. Okay. So, for example, if somebody becomes a victim of an illegal dismissal, illegal reassignment, or any other illegal personnel action for that matter, they can go to the CSE for redress.
Let's say consultants or mga assistant secretaries, ganun.
Consultants are considered employed through contracts of service.
I see. Okay.
Technically speaking, they are not considered a government employee. Because their relationship with the government is not governed by civil service rules. They are governed by the contract which they signed with the government.
Right.
Okay, so they have no appointments. Unlike regular officials and employees who are issued appointments and whose appointments are being submitted to the Civil Service Commission for attestation, because we scrutinize those appointments.
I see.
Okay. Chairman Duque, what level is covered by having to take the civil service exam?
Well, practically all. First of all, we have the career service and the non-career. Both actually both are actually governed by a set of qualification standards. No? So if your position is considered a career, you have to have the education, the relevant training, experience, and the civil service eligibility. This is the career service professional examination that one has to take. And then you also have the civil service career sub-professional examination for the lower positions.
Now, Assistant Commissioner, we were talking about this earlier. The employees of the government, they're not covered by the labor code, is that correct?
They are not. Okay. They are covered by civil service rules.
Okay. And are those rules drastically different? And what are the pertinent differences between labor code, for example?
Yeah. Well, maybe let's focus, for instance, on one aspect muna, if dismissal. So some people always complain, was I legally dismissed by my employer? But then sometimes if I'm approached and I find out that they're working for the government, I tell them, sorry, but you're not covered by the labor code. Okay. So maybe you can clarify, for instance, if you're working for the government, what grounds are there for being justifiably dismissed, or how can you question if your dismissal is justified?
Well, first, let me emphasize that the rules that we follow when it comes to determining whether a government official or employee has been illegally dismissed or not is what we call as the revised rules on administrative cases in the civil service, which the Civil Service Commission itself issued. However, if you will ask whether it's different from what is stated in the labor law, well, for one, we're also following the principles enunciated in the Angtibay case. I think lawyers are familiar with that. Case, yeah. So you cannot just dismiss or discipline a government official or employee without giving that person the benefit of due process.
So it's always
the right to be heard, and there has to be a cause. Okay. Now, under the new RACs, however, if this government official or employee who will be dismissed has waived his right to a formal investigation, then we can decide the case based on position papers that they will submit. We are not strict when it comes to application of technicalities. So long as the right to due process is served by giving him the right to be heard, then it's okay. That complies already with the constitutional requirement of due process.
Yeah, I would like to add also that as Ronquillo has mentioned, we are governed by the revised rules on admin cases in the civil service, which actually is based on Chapter 6 of Book 5 of Executive Order 292. So, plus of course, the labor code suppletorily applies, no? This is the basis for the the questions that you've asked me about how do we deal with employees who are filed cases against, and so there's due process. We ensure that the due process is followed.
And Chairman, if you question, for instance, your dismissal and you say there are no grounds or the grounds
There's
are
appeal.
wrong, they can appeal to the CSC, Civil
course.
Service Commission. And then if they're, again, denied, can they go to the Court of Appeals?
Sure, we can do that.
So essentially, in a way, in the same way that the Department of Labor has labor arbiters, you also have the equivalent staff there.
Well, the commission,
labor arbiters.
the Civil Service Commission is not just an appellate body. We also entertain complaints directly. Okay? So our own regional directors in different regional offices nationwide are given jurisdiction to hear in the
Can
site
adjudicate,
administrative cases,
yeah.
yes, that are filed before them.
Okay, I have another question. What if you're not part of the government, but you have complaints against other government employees? For instance, you're applying in the
You can
LTO.
file.
They can go to the Civil Service Commission
Yes.
and file their complaints against
Sure.
these employees. So
Sure.
I think that's a very
Correct.
helpful tip.
Can I
yes.
add to that? Under the existing jurisprudence, the complainant in an administrative case is treated as a mere witness to the commission of the offense. So anybody can file, whether you are in government or outside the government, so long as you have witnessed the commission of an irregularity or any dishonest conduct, you can file it.
I think it's a very helpful tip
Yeah,
to
very
the
helpful.
people out there, especially for those dealing with government agencies. For instance, if you're applying for a license or registration in any government office and you have a complaint with any of the government employees that you notice are being neglectful or...
Yeah, we have a specific law with regard to that, and that is the Republic Act 9485 or the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007. So we are the oversight agency to ensure that the law is being implemented by all agencies of government providing frontline services. So anything about red tape, anything about complaints about how an agency like LTO or PhilHealth, SSS, GSIS, how they provide services, they're protected. I mean, if they have some complaints, they can file it with us, and we can actually ensure that their grievance or their complaints are attended to, and that of course, the appropriate interventions are done.
And they don't need a lawyer
Yeah.
for that to file
I
this
don't think
complaint.
they do, no.
There's a desk for it?
Yes, we have the Public Assistance and Complaints Desk.
Now, going on the opposite side, naman, Chairman and ASCOM, we talk about termination and complaints. The hiring part.
Okay.
What are the standards that you have in the hiring process? I mean, first of all, what are the requirements for you to be civil service eligible?
Well, first of all, you have to comply with our qualification standards. That's education, training, the eligibility, and experience. But right now, the Civil Service Commission has added another facet to the usual QS, which is now what we call the competency-based recruitment and qualification standards. So we've identified all the necessary competencies for all the positions, at least in the Civil Service Commission. And based on that, we will be able to identify, other than the 4 usual QS, the ET, EE, we have now a new dimension, which is the competency base. So we already identified this, and the objective is really to put the best possible candidate or applicant for the appropriate position.
Okay.
So you just want to avoid people good in communications. For example, they're working in accounting division, or people good in math, they're in public information. So it's such a mismatch, and we want to avoid that.
Yeah.
We want to avoid that.
The efficient allocation of human resources.
Right,
there.
exactly.
I still have a lot of questions.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm really glad that we have no less than the chairman and the assistant commissioner of the CSE here with us tonight. So we have a lot to discuss. Legal Help Desk will return after this short break. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel with our guest, Dr. Francisco Duque III, Chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and Attorney Ariel Ronquillo, Associate Commissioner of the Civil Service Commission.
Yeah, good evening again. Gentlemen, for you to be part of the government or the civil service, do you necessarily have to take the civil service exam? Or are there exceptions to the rule that basically if you've gone through particular I guess public test, like the bar, for example, you don't have to take the exam anymore?
Well, the first answer to your question is yes, you've got to have passed the civil service or career service professional examination or the sub-professional examinations for you to become eligible. But there are many instances where you don't need to have that eligibility, or you don't need to take the examination to take the eligibility. For example, RA 1080, this is the professional eligibility.
Yeah.
So if you're a bar passer, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a you're an engineer, and so what have you, you're automatically granted the eligibility. Then you have the barangay official eligibility. Then you also have the barangay nutrition eligibility, the honor students eligibility, the foreign service officers eligibility. So you've got all of this other routes by which you can become eligible.
So in other words,
outside of the
is that automatic?
examination.
So basically, me being a lawyer, I can just go and be appointed.
Yes.
Or apply for a government position.
Yes, especially if the position that you're going to occupy deals with the practice of your particular profession.
I see.
But otherwise, if you were a lawyer or a doctor, but you're doing, purely executive management, managerial position, and then I think you need to still get the appropriate eligibility. Even
for the level of maintenance workers, for instance, they have to take an exam?
Well, it's a sub-professional examination. So they also need the eligibility to enjoy security of tenure and then to benefit from a promotion to a higher position.
And if you fail, you can keep taking the exam.
Yes. In fact, we have two ways by which one can take the examination. One is through the paper and pencil test. That's the usual. You go to the classroom and then you take the exams. And then we have the COMEX, so the computerized examination. So we've launched this, and in fact, we've launched it in 10 regions, and we hope to be able to provide this very special service nationwide.
So purely online? It's like online?
Well, it's an online registration, but you still have to go to the COMEX testing centers. So you need to answer using, your own PC, and then...
so there are schedules.
You time from going,
saves you
there.
time, right. It streamlined the process, and it has integrated what used to be 5 standalone examination processes. So it's going to improve access, And I think the ease of taking the examination is really much improved. But of course, the paper and pencil test continues, but down the road, the number of paper and pencil test examinees would hopefully go down, while the number of those taking the comics will go up.
And then I have a question, since it seems like you have to attract talented, qualified people given the exams. What about compensating them? Are the civil service employees covered by the minimum wage law?
We are covered by the so-called salary standardization law. As a general rule, if you work with the government, you have to be covered. Your salaries will have to be covered by that law. Well, except if you are employed in an agency which is exempted from the SSL, in which case the salaries are actually dictated by their own policymakers within the agency.
Okay. So for government employees, every time there's an announcement nationally that there's been a wage increase, it doesn't necessarily apply to them.
It doesn't follow.
It has to be legislated.
I see.
Yeah, it has to be legislated.
Now, let's talk about unions. I mean, generally, there's, of course, the Constitution provides the right to unionize or to organize. No? Are employees under the Civil Service Commission or under the civil servants, are they allowed to form unions and air their grievances and
Very much.
negotiate with the government? And
Very much. They're allowed to.
But they're not allowed to go on strikes?
They're not.
They're not. But they can go on protest, but making sure that they don't do this during office hours. So you have 12 to 1, you can do that, and beyond 5 o'clock, then you can, of course, manifest
Sa trabaho muna, and then so they can't just be...
But there are exemptions, the police, the BJMP, the military. These are subsectors of the bureaucracy that are not allowed.
So wait, you mentioned police, so military, they're under the civil service, I mean, they're civil servants, of course.
The PNP, both uniformed and non-uniformed, is under the Civil Service Commission, except for the uniformed personnel of the military or the armed forces. They're all others are under the civil service jurisdiction of the Civil Service Commission.
I see. The uniformed are the uniformed
are not
part of the.
Insofar as the
so if I had a complaint
military,
with, if I had a complaint with the police, I can complain. To the civil service.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I wanted to go back on that because kanina Chairman Duque touched on a very interesting topic, which is complaining about government employees. For instance, if you're dealing with an agency and maraming red tape, or minsan kung makahuli ka ng tumatanggap ng lagay, even during the commercial break, we were talking about it, and he said you can report it directly to the CSC. And I think you have initiatives that make this easy to report. One is that
Call
desk.
center.
The contact center ng bayan, or CCB, where you can access through a very easy to remember number. It's 16565.
16565.
Or you can call up. You can text that, or you can call 0908-881-6565. We'll give you the number later. And so you can actually air your complaints or your grievance. And there are 15 call center agents on standby to process the call, to understand exactly what's wrong. And there are agency-specific queries because, the contact center ng bayan, which is headed by the Civil Service Commission, consists of several agencies. The BIR, the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Health, and then the National Computer Center, or the NCC. Then now, recently we've added PAG-ASA, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. And then there's one more, I can't recall, I forget. So it's pretty well managed, professionally run, and it's not just a call center that receives complaints and period. It's a call center that processes and manages the complaints until its logical conclusion.
Wow, that's
whether
impressive.
there has been any positive action done in response to the complaint. So we can track it down.
Yeah, I guess helpful tips for our viewers out there. If you have a complaint, if you encounter a problem while dealing with any government agency, I guess you can give us tips. One, write down the name.
Yes.
And then write down the name of the government agency.
You may not even
And then-
want to write down your name because for fear of reprisal.
But you get the name of the government employee
It's
na
best.
kinocomplain mo.
That's right.
The best
Yeah,
way to do it.
that's why we prescribe
The
and
person
consistent
complained
with
of.
the provisions of RA 9485. You have to have an ID.
ID.
Not just an ordinary ID, but it's a reversible ID, and it has a fixed, a big enough ID for
So
easy identification.
Yeah,
easy
that's very
identification.
good because sometimes if you deal with them tapos anong name mo ayaw ibigay, di ba?
Tsaka nila gagano'n nila yung ID mo.
Yes, yeah.
So nakagalot, kung andito yung picture mo, gagano'n, wala ka na makita. So prescribe namin, lahat back and forth.
Back and forth pala.
And ASCOM, if let's say, if you file a complaint against someone in the civil service, and because of what you investigated, that person gets terminated, he cannot go back to the civil service, right? That it's
Well,
that bad.
if a person is dismissed from the government service, one of the accessory penalties that he will suffer is perpetual disqualification from holding public office.
So mabigat, no? Mabigat yung penalty. In other
Cannot
words,
go
if
back
you
anymore.
cannot go back to government service anymore. If so that's why
He
that's
can
why-
try his luck in the private sector.
But not back to the government.
Yes.
But
Definitely.
no, going back to that. No? Let's say I'm a lawyer, for example, and I get disbarred. I can't. Let's just say I was a lawyer in government. I get disbarred. I got into government service because I was, by virtue of the fact that I was a lawyer. If I got disbarred, do I automatically lose my civil service eligibility?
Well, it's not automatic because if you get employed and you were able to get a permanent appointment, your separation from the service will have to be for cause and after due process.
And not because I was disbarred.
If you are disbarred, that means you have committed something wrong. You have to be charged with that in a separate
proceeding.
Yes.
It doesn't preclude the agency or the appointing
Yeah,
authority
from charging.
from filing a case against you.
Yeah.
The basis of which the reason why you were disbarred in the first place.
Okay.
So you can be facing two cases.
Two cases,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I better be careful then. All right. Okay, we have received some questions from our viewers via social media. We'll answer them with the help of our guests, of course, starting with Jeannie, who asks, I learned about the CSC's computerized examination. How do I take the career service examination through that process? Do I still need to personally appear at a CSC office? What are the requirements? I am from Surigao del Norte. Yan.
Well, what you can do is you can do an online registration, and then from there you need to appear personally to apply, and then you can, of course, once all the documents or the information have been submitted, you can take the examination via the computerized examination, and then you can wait for the results, and then the eligibility certificate can be issued. But you see, as I've said, our COMEX is still undergoing birthing pains. So it's not yet, as we've envisioned it to be, but eventually, once the bugs are cleared, and then assuming everything is working as planned, then the whole process is just going to take a few hours.
A few hours,
Yeah,
yeah.
end-to-end processing.
Kasama na yung results.
Pati na yung results.
Wow.
Which is really a game changer in the sense that hindi guys computerized as a paper and pencil test takes 2 to 3 months before the results are out. No?
So this is instant.
Yeah, instant. So this is really a breakthrough. But of course, I have to be frank or honest that right now it's still a bit shaky pa kasi we haven't perfected the system.
And regional office in Surigao is available.
Yes.
In case may kailangan.
I think, but Surigao is Surigao. That is region.
Caraga?
That's Caraga. Caraga.
Okay.
I think we launched it there already. But I think you just have to go to the website of the Civil Service Commission for a more complete information.
Okay, so Jeannie, please check the website of the CSC.
Great.
And our next question is from Manny. My mother plans to run as a barangay chairman in the next elections. My question is, does she still need to take the CSC examination?
No.
No. Okay.
Very good. Why is that?
Well, if she is running for a public office, all that she needs to do is to run and get elected. That's all, yes.
So in
makes her
other words,
automatically-
mas madaling ma-elect kasi walang examinations required.
Wala.
Pero to be hired within the government in a position to be appointed, you have to
Yeah.
pass the test.
What she needs is to court the possible voters. To vote for her.
I have a question though.
Yun yung
If
test niya.
a mayor or barangay chairman hires people, will all of those have to be civil service eligible?
Well, if they'll be
staff?
hiring career people, yes. Those people will have to qualify for those positions.
So-
And they cannot be appointed to any permanent position unless they have an eligibility, which means they pass civil service examination.
But if it's in the office, let's say office of the barangay chairwoman or office of the mayor, those are,
If the position is coterminous or confidential to the appointing authority, then there is no need to pass the civil service examinations, because the only qualification standards for confidential position is trust and confidence of the appointing authority.
These positions that have been mentioned form part of the non-career
Non-career.
Non-career.
service. So these are coterminous, confidential positions, elective positions, and their personal and
Confidential
staff. And then you have the members of the constitutional commissions or boards, and then what
Even
else?
casual employees are
Yes,
covered.
contractual employees. are
Contractual,
casuals considered as non-career
They don't need eligibility.
positions.
Okay, so it can really happen na you have an elected official with people under him that have higher IQs because of the civil service examination.
You know, that's what's wrong with us. You know, you elect people and yet you really don't ask for, you know, all these qualifications that you impose on people who wish to enter the career or non-career service.
yeah. In fact, there are more requirements to be civil service eligible than to run for president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for elected positions,
Ironically.
mostly the only qualification is the ability to read and write.
That's
Yeah,
right.
for
Okay.
elected posts.
For elected posts, yeah. I mean, like in your case, if you were convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, diba? I mean, you're disqualified right away, right?
Well, if you are convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, that conviction itself is an offense. You have to be tried for that administratively. So it's not automatic.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, the price we have to pay for democracy.
Ayan.
We'll have to take another short break. Legal Help Desk will be back to answer your questions. Stay tuned.
So it's
Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel with Dr. Francisco Duque III and Attorney Ariel Ronquillo from the Civil Service Commission.
okay. So let's go naman to the aspect of the efficiency that you it's 1.4 million people that you're managing. How do you manage the efficiency and I guess the professionalization of 1.4 million employees?
Well,
Chairman.
First of all, you need to have a performance management system. Well, we have one of the HROD initiatives, Human Resource and Organization Development Initiatives. One of 5 is the Strategic Performance Management System, which links employee performance to organizational outcomes. So we've veered away from the usual performance measurement of, you know, outputs of number of documents that have been processed without linking that particular output to a desired outcome, which means that now we need to take track, we need to measure what you're doing in terms of contributing to the successful realization of the agency's vision and mission. And in this case, insofar as government agencies are concerned, their mandates. No? So we've been able to link this together. And of course, we need to be very clear with the target setting. What's the target of the different employees and officials in the agency? And based on the targets, you're measured, your performance is measured. So in fact, we have a program that has been pursued in earnest by the President himself. It's the results-based performance management system, which is the basis for the formulation of a performance-based incentive system. And that has two components, the performance-based bonus. Again, this is all performance-based. And then the productivity enhancement incentive. So the general objective is really for us in government to institutionalize outstanding performance, promote outstanding performance, and reward them for standing out.
Good reward system, meritocracy.
Meritocracy, and the reward, part of the meritocracy and the rewards system of government. And that's one of the 4 cycles of human resource management. So you have recruitment and retention, and then we have performance management, and then we have training and development, which is, of course, that has to be continuous. But we need to identify what are the competency gaps. And then target those competency gaps by giving this competency-based learning and development.
And do you find that to be effective? Because growing up as a Filipino, medyo nasanay na ako na every time may apply ka sabihin nila, pero mabagal dyan. Or it will take you, for a document, sasabihin nila, it will take you mga 1 month. Or do you find na nag-improve na yung efficiency ng mga government agencies or at least the employees under the Civil Service Commission?
I think based on recent surveys, we have generated very significant development in terms of improving public service delivery. Yeah.
Now, there's a general perception that if you're in government, you have this kind of security of tenure, that it's harder for you to get removed from your position. Is that the case? Is that really the case, sir? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the inherent advantages of occupying a position in the career service. No? You have security of tenure, but that's not absolute. That's why I keep reminding appointing authorities to install, to put in place a honest to goodness, credible performance management system. Because the problem is some appointing authorities and mostly local chief executives, if they don't like you because you're identified with the opposition, so they'll try to move you around, they'll put you in a floating status. And that's when the problem comes, because these employees will come to us and appeal to us, and they will complain. And verily, we would order reinstatement if we see that the movement is not legal or one that takes the nature of a constructive dismissal. So we order reinstatement and with payment of back wages. Now, the way to balance, the security of tenure is with a setting up of a performance management system that will measure the accomplishment of the employee. So now, if you've set the target and the employee fails to reach or exceed the target, then 2 unsatisfactory ratings will suffice for you to be taken out.
So it's not absolute that you
Yung
have
security of tenure, no,
Oh,
it's not absolute. You know, the problem is really when the appointing authority or the agency does not have any performance management system in place. So kailangan you measure performance. That's what I keep telling them. I always remind them, measure. You have to have metrics.
So if that manager didn't have a system, he should be removed, right?
The manager?
Maybe for inefficiency.
Or gross neglect of duty, inefficiency.
All right, I think we still have some questions from our viewers. Let's continue answering these with our guests, of course, starting with Sean. In government offices, what is the basis of the amount of maternity benefits? Is there a cutoff? What if the salary of the employee increased while she was on maternity leave? Will her maternity benefit also increase since this is usually given before or at the start of her maternity leave? A little bit technical question, but...
Actually, the maternity leave benefits does not refer to the money that you will receive from the government. The maternity leave benefits refer to the right of the woman who gives birth to go on leave with pay for 60 days. When we say with full pay, she will receive her salary in advance while she is on leave. Okay. And her leave credits are intact, everything is intact. If benefits are given during the time that she is on maternity leave, she will receive all those benefits.
So in other words, if there was an increase, she would be covered by the increase.
She will be entitled to that because this is not an extra pay. This is just an advance payment of the salaries that she would receive for 2 months, that she will be on leave with pay because of the fact that she gives birth.
I see.
Yeah. It's one of the advantages of being a state worker. We have so many leave privileges. We have maternity, we have paternity, we have special leave privileges, we have calamity, rehabilitation privileges. So that's why in Yolanda, we promulgated a civil service circular there. If I recall right, that circular had allowed government employees not to report to work, but they'll be considered as
being paid.
Yes.
Because a lot of government offices were destroyed and could not operate.
That's right.
That's on top of the usual vacation and sick leave.
Okay,
What is the usual vacation and sick leaves?
15. You're entitled to 15 days vacation leave and sick
So
leave.
that's more than the labor code.
Yeah.
Diba?
Yes.
That's more. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, do you have overtime pay for your employees?
Well,
Well,
you
if
have CTI, right?
Yes, if you are authorized to work overtime, it will be with pay. And if the government agency has no capacity to pay the overtime work, the employee in turn can avail of the compensatory time off.
I mean CTO.
CTO.
So this is beginning to sound like a commercial or recruitment for government office.
I want to apply na.
Basta take note, mas maraming leaves. Okay, we have another question from Jessie. I'm an employee of a government-owned and controlled corporation or GOCC, currently holding a supervisory position. In February 2008, I was designated as a manager in acting capacity without any change in compensation. The designation was due to the opening of a new branch. It lasted for more than a year. Then I was reverted back to my original position. This happened twice while working under them. Do I have a legal right to demand that I be promoted to managerial positions considering the length of time that I was designated in acting capacity?
The answer is no. If you are designated, from the very start, it is meant to be a temporary arrangement. Designation is not appointment. In fact, the rule says that if you are designated, it can only last for a year. So if the designation is stopped anytime, you cannot demand that the position be given to you.
Okay, so designation is different
from appointment.
So,
But again, it doesn't preclude that person to apply for a promotion.
If he wants, he can apply.
If he thinks that he's very much qualified, then go ahead and apply.
And the application is lodged with his immediate supervisor
With his appointing
or with
authority.
the CSC?
With the appointing authority. Yeah.
Okay.
Our duty when it comes to appointment is to attest, screen and attest the appointment.
if you were going to make a sales pitch to our televiewers, to work for government? What are the advantages? What are the advantages?
Kasi yung mga,
Yeah.
and can you bust some myths?
Yeah.
Are government employees really underpaid compared to the private sector?
You want to
competitive?
answer that?
Yes.
Well, let me answer that very briefly. Depends on what category of employment you're in. If you are in the third level, then I will say that based on the study conducted by the CSE in 2008, comparing what third level officers of government receive compared to a medium-sized private company receives, employees in the medium-sized private companies receive. It's 70% less than their equivalent in the private sector. And then if you are in a position in the second level, which means professional, technical, and scientific positions, you're 40% underpaid. But however, in the first level, the lower positions, you're
Almost the same.
no, you're 20% paid more than your
Okay.
counterpart in the private sector.
So meaning
Medium-sized
pagka
company.
medium to
level.
higher level, dapat talaga from the puso. It's your desire to
yeah.
want to serve the public,
Like
not
you.
chasing after the compensation.
Like you from the
I
heart,
can
di ba?
attest to that.
But let me tell you again, through the worthy programs of the president. The president has prioritized the results-based performance management system, and it now helps to correct the imbalance, you know, and the inferior compensation package that the second and third level employees receive. So the president, in fact, had set aside a budget of anywhere from 8 to 10 billion pesos in 2012, and I think for 2013, he's increased the budget to about 12 to 14 billion.
Okay.
So these are efforts precisely meant to improve compensation package for the state workers with the end in view that, you know, hopefully we don't lose them to the private sector.
Okay, so there you go. More compensation and more paid leaves.
More leaves.
So for
I'm
now-
sold. I'm sold. Okay.
We'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Francisco Duque III and Attorney Ariel Ronquillo from the Civil Service Commission for being with us tonight in discussing your legal rights under the CSC. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
That was
very
very
much.
helpful.
Thank you very much on behalf of the Civil Service Commission, Attorney Karen and Attorney Rod. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still tuned in to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. And today we had a very interesting conversation about government jobs.
I've always
the
wanted.
civil
I've always been curious to join the government.
Yes,
But,
and today we learned that actually it takes a lot of qualifications to join the Civil Service Commission in order to make sure that we have good people running the government. So one, you really have to take a civil service exam to determine your eligibility. And because of the current efforts of the CSC, if you live far, you don't want to go to personally appear, there's already an online testing exam available.
Tsaka Karen, there seems to be a major effort on the part of Chairman Duque to professionalize it and make it more efficient. No? Of course, being a government or being eligible for civil service, all you need to be is a Filipino citizen, 18 years old. But there are several other requirements. Yun nga, yung exam, and then also you have there's been no you've not been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. There are several other provisions, no. But there are exceptions to that. The exam, as you mentioned, one of it is if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a professional. In other words, you went through a government exam, just like mga board or the bar, for example. You're exempted, so you're automatically eligible to join the government. And as they mentioned earlier, there seems to be more security of tenure in government, but that's not absolute. In other words, if you're also inefficient and pasaway ka rin ng konti, you can be, of course, you can be removed just like any other employee. Yeah.
And also to bust the myth that government positions are not very well paid compared to the private sector. Chairman Duque mentioned earlier that when it comes to yung mga first level positions, they're actually 20% higher paid than the private sector according to a survey.
Yeah.
Now, when the medium and higher positions, then normally, those are normally less paid compared to the private sector. But for lower level positions, they're actually higher paid.
So in the long term talaga, it should be in the heart.
Yeah,
na
that you really want to serve the public, yes.
Yan.
And then, this is more useful naman for everyone out there. If you're dealing with government agencies, meaning they're covered by the Civil Service Commission, then if you encounter any inefficient service, red tape, or mga violations, or kunwari nakita nyo harap-harapan na merong maling ginagawa yung mga government employees, you can actually report them directly to the Civil Service Commission. So if you're calling, you can call 16565, that's landline, and you can text complaints also to 0908-881-6565. And sabi nga ni Chairman Duque kanina, one of the requirements they're imposing is that yung mga IDs ng government employees should be back-to-back, meaning even if they try to cover their names, dapat kita pa rin. So list down the name and the government agency so that you can report them properly for any of your complaints.
And by the way, hindi lang yung mga employees ng LTO or PhilHealth or what have you, even the police. The police are also included under the CSC.
Even, LTO as well.
Yeah. So yun. So, very helpful indeed. So we'd like to thank our guests nga earlier, and of course Chairman Duque, no, and Attorney Ronquillo. Now, over the week, we have received some questions from our viewers on topics we have previously discussed, and in this segment, we will answer these for you to serve as a recap of the topics that we have tackled. So let's start with Anna, who asks, I have reported a harassment incident to my immediate company supervisor. However, I was surprised that upon investigation, I was the one who was terminated. My question is, was the ruling right? I believe I was the aggrieved party since I was the one who was harassed. That's it's a little bit difficult.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to determine because we don't know the facts of
Yes. Although I would say to Anna, it sounds like, one, she has to check first if she was given due process. Because if she filed a complaint, every company or employer is required to have rules and regulations on sexual harassment. So that has to undergo a process that if you report a sexual harassment case, the employer should have rules on how to deal with the sexual harassment case and how to penalize those who commit sexual harassment. Now, if they find that, for instance, the complaint has no basis, and according to their rules, this amounts to serious misconduct, then there might be grounds to dismiss you. But then, hindi pwedeng basta ka na lang nila i-dismiss.
Yeah.
They should have, one, a hearing process where they should hear your side, and they should have, again, another notice to you as to their decision on why they decided to terminate you instead. If they did not follow that, then you have a case to go to the NLRC to complain for illegal dismissal.
With cause, everything dapat with cause. And that applies both government and private. No? You cannot be terminated without cause. And as mentioned by Attorney Karen, yan, due process dapat. May hearing dapat. You can't go around that. All right.
Our next recap question is from Joanne. I bought a condo unit 3 years ago and was promised that the turnover period will take a minimum of 36 months. Until now, the completion of the building is far from over. I requested for immediate cancellation and refund of the 24 installment payments I made. I believe that I am eligible for 50% refund of the total payments, but my request was denied. I would like to sue the developer. Can I do so given my situation with them?
For sure. I mean, I think there's a civil case there for sure.
Yeah.
To claim for
although also
breach of contract.
Yes, and I would advise Joanne, at least if you don't want to hire a lawyer first, you can actually go to the HLURB directly, because they are the ones that supervise and monitor mga condo developers.
Yes. Maraming case na ganun. Sa HLURB, and you don't have, you don't need a lawyer. You can just go to the HLURB. And they can
look into this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Our last recap question is from Carl. What should the employer do with an employee who absents himself without official leave for more than a month now? So AWOL to, absence without leave. No, I mean, definitely.
This might be a ground for dismissal with cause. Yeah, because under our labor code, there are several grounds for dismissing an employee for just cause. And one of them is one analogous case as yung abandonment of work, meaning if this person has gone on absence without leave now for a month na, then you might be able to consider this employee as having abandoned his job, and therefore it's a ground for termination. And it might even fall as one, serious misconduct, or also gross or habitual neglect of duties, which are all grounds for dismissal.
Again, the presumption is walang paalam, he left. And you have absolutely no idea where he or she is. All right.
Yeah. But just as a tip, even if you have a ground for dismissal, make sure to follow due process para hindi ka naman maireklamo rin sa NLRC. So make sure that you give notice to this person on why you're dismissing them, and then hear their side, and then when you decide to dismiss them, you also have to give notice to them that they are being terminated.
No, just to be sure. Just to be sure. Even if I'm very sure about the grounds for termination, I always give the notice and the proper hearing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always safe. Always safe. All right. That is all the time that we have for tonight. We would like to thank our viewers who have sent us their legal questions via social media. If you have any questions or comments on tonight's episode, share them with us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you missed any of our previous episodes, you may watch these at your convenience by simply downloading the Solar News Channel app on your mobile devices from Google Play and the simple Apple App Store. And it really works, Rod. I have one on my phone.
I have it. Yeah.
Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night. How are government workers protected? Good evening. You're watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will be discussing your legal rights as a government employee under the Civil Service Commission. What you need to know about the Civil Service Commission, its functions, its responsibilities, and what you need to do to uphold your labor rights under the Commission.
Our guest for tonight is Dr. Francisco Duque III, Chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and Attorney Ariel Ronquillo, Associate Commissioner of the Civil Service Commission. Good evening.
Good evening, sirs. Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening.
I'm so happy we have no less than the Chairman of the CSC here to answer questions.
I know. And I know there are a lot of questions. Obviously, there's a lot of employees in the government and those who want to be part of the government. And so we'd like to start off. Maybe, Chairman, we'll throw the first question to you. Can you, what is the Civil Service Commission?
The Civil Service Commission of the Philippines is a government agency that acts as a human resource institution with the task of overseeing the integrity and welfare of the country's 1.4 million government workers, stationed in various government offices nationwide.
Civil Service Commission is a constitutional body. It's the central HR institution of the Philippine government and the advisor to the President on human resource management matters.
Originally established in the 1900s as a bureau that administered civil service exams, it has
of course, it advises the government of the Philippines on civil service matters. Also, it is tasked to integrate all human resource development programs for all levels and ranks in government. And also it is to institutionalize a management climate that is conducive to public accountability.
Chairman Duque, you mentioned 1.4 million government employees covered by the CSC.
Right.
Can you clarify what types of jobs? Like, for instance, if you're a janitor working in the office of the Register of Deeds, are you covered by the CSC? How do you know if you're part of this whole system?
Well, you see, the way it's structured is that the state workers are classified under three categories. The first level, which consists of the clerical, trades, crafts, and custodianship positions. Ito yung mababa, first level.
Since been converted into a commission in 1959 through Republic Act 2260 or the Civil Service Law. But it was only in 1975 that the functions of the commission was redefined by virtue of Presidential Decree 807 or the Civil Service Decree of the Philippines.
Now, the qualification standards are relevant education, relevant training, relevant experience, and the appropriate civil service eligibility. But to have the appropriate civil service eligibility, the individual must first pass a career service examination. And that's given nationwide, either paper and pencil or written or through the computer.
Today, the Civil Service Commission is headed by its present chair, Dr. Francisco Duque III, who has made it the agency's goal to follow through with the mandate set upon them by the law. If the CSC is the central human resource institution for government workers, do they follow the Labor Code of the Philippines? If they don't, what set of labor laws do they follow?
Really, and what are its functions, responsibilities?
Well, very briefly, the Civil Service Commission is the central human resource institution of the Philippine bureaucracy, and its task is to review, formulate, implement, monitor, and programs, policies, and projects for the 1.4 million bureaucrats. Constitutionally, it is mandated to do the following things. No? First, it is tasked to develop the career service, and then it is tasked to adopt measures to promote meritocracy, efficiency, integrity, morale, progressiveness, and responsiveness in the civil service. And it is also tasked or mandated to strengthen the merit and reward system of government.